The world woke up to breaking news this morning. Reports confirm that Israeli naval forces intercepted and attacked a humanitarian flotilla carrying vital aid to Gaza. The fleet, made up of 10 vessels, was sailing under international protection, loaded with food, medicine, and emergency supplies. But instead of reaching the desperate civilians of Gaza, the ships were seized, their mission cut short by force. What followed has sent shockwaves across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Ibrahim Traoré, the bold leader of Burkina Faso, has issued a warning unlike anything we've heard before. His message to Israel is clear: such aggression will not go unanswered. For weeks, international volunteers, doctors, and humanitarian workers had been preparing this convoy. They believed that this time, with global attention fixed on Gaza's humanitarian crisis, Israel would allow the ship's safe passage. But yesterday, under the cover of darkness, Israeli commandos launched an assault. Witnesses describe helicopters circling overhead, warning shots fired into the sea, and boarding parties storming the decks. By dawn, the entire flotilla had been diverted to Israeli ports. Aid workers were arrested, cargo confiscated, and the hope of relief for Gaza's people destroyed. In the words of one captured volunteer, "We came with bread and medicine, and they greeted us with bullets." Burkina Faso's president did not remain silent. Within hours of the reports, Traoré called an emergency meeting in Ouagadougou. Standing before his generals and parliament, he delivered a fiery speech that is now echoing across the globe. "Israel must know," he declared, "that Africa will not stand by while innocent lives starve under siege. If they raise their weapons against aid, they raise their weapons against humanity itself." His warning carried a sharp edge, one that Israel and its allies could not ignore. He hinted at mobilizing African nations, forming a united response, and even severing all diplomatic ties with states supporting the blockade. In Tel Aviv, the reaction was swift. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended the operation, claiming the ships posed a security threat and might have been carrying contraband. But no evidence was presented, and the international community is demanding answers. Across Europe, protests erupted outside Israeli embassies. In Spain, where the flotilla began its journey, tens of thousands marched through Madrid chanting, "Let Gaza live," and holding up portraits of Traoré, hailing him as the only leader willing to stand against Israel's power. The streets of Paris, London, and Rome saw similar demonstrations, with crowds calling on their governments to hold Israel accountable. Meanwhile, the United Nations has been thrown into chaos. Emergency sessions are underway in New York, with diplomats trading heated accusations. African representatives, led by Burkina Faso, demanded sanctions against Israel. Western diplomats pushed back, accusing Traoré of escalating tensions. But as one African delegate shouted on the floor of the UN chamber, "If sending food and medicine is terrorism, then humanity itself is on trial." The clash between the global South and the Western powers has never been sharper. This moment may mark the beginning of a new geopolitical divide. Back in Gaza, the consequences are dire. Hospitals report shortages of medicine, electricity is failing, and food prices are skyrocketing. Families who had been waiting for the flotilla's arrival broke down in tears when they heard the news. One mother, interviewed by a local journalist, said, "We told our children that help was coming from Africa. Now we don't know what to tell them." Her voice, carried through social media, has become a symbol of Gaza's despair and of the promise that was snatched away. The hashtag #AfricaStandsWithGaza is now trending worldwide. Traoré's defiance has drawn comparisons to historic African leaders who once resisted colonial domination. Analysts say his words mark a turning point, not just for Burkina Faso, but for Africa as a whole. He has positioned himself as the voice of the oppressed, standing against a global order dominated by Western interests. Already, other African nations have begun issuing statements of support. Mali, Niger, and even South Africa have hinted at forming a joint humanitarian alliance. Rumors suggest that African navies may soon escort aid convoys themselves, daring Israel to intervene again. If that happens, the conflict could escalate beyond anything we've seen in decades. But Traoré knows the risks. Israel is backed by powerful allies, and open confrontation could trigger sanctions or worse. Yet his gamble is clear. By standing firm, he is betting on a tide of global anger to isolate Israel diplomatically. And judging by the scenes unfolding worldwide, his bet may not be misplaced. In Washington, however, U.S. officials are doubling down. They accused Traoré of using the Gaza crisis for political theater and warned Burkina Faso of serious consequences if it continues its defiant stance. The White House insists that Israel acted within its rights, but across Africa, that narrative is being rejected outright. In Ouagadougou tonight, thousands gathered in front of the presidential palace, waving Burkinabe flags and chanting Traoré's name. To them, this is not just about Gaza. It is about dignity, sovereignty, and justice. A young protester put it simply, "When they silence Gaza, they silence us. And when Traoré speaks, it is Africa's voice they hear." The crowd's energy reflects a larger truth. The fight over one flotilla has ignited something far bigger, something that may reshape alliances and challenge the global balance of power. And so, the question remains, how far is Traoré willing to go? Will Africa truly confront Israel and its backers? Or will this crisis fade like so many before? Tonight, the world waits for answers. But one thing is undeniable. What began as an aid mission has turned into a diplomatic earthquake, and Ibrahim Traoré now stands at the very center of it. As the dust settles from the shocking interception of the aid flotilla, the story is far from over. In fact, it has only just begun. Within 24 hours of Israel's operation, Ibrahim Traoré escalated his warning into concrete action. Standing once again before the people of Burkina Faso, he declared a national day of mourning for the victims of the flotilla attack and announced a bold initiative, an African-led coalition to guarantee humanitarian aid to Gaza. "If the powerful nations will not open the gates of justice," he said, "then Africa will break those gates open." His words lit a fire across the continent. From Dakar to Addis Ababa, rallies erupted in support of Traoré's stance. In Mali and Niger, leaders pledged to contribute ships and medical supplies to a new humanitarian convoy. South Africa went further, offering to bring the case against Israel before the International Criminal Court. The streets of Cairo and Algiers filled with demonstrators waving both African and Palestinian flags, chanting, "Africa will not bow." The idea of a united African humanitarian mission, once unimaginable, was suddenly becoming a reality. Israel, meanwhile, doubled down. Prime Minister Netanyahu warned that any future convoys would be treated as hostile incursions. His cabinet accused Traoré of fueling anti-Israeli sentiment and destabilizing the region. Yet no amount of rhetoric could stop the images flooding social media. The seized flotilla, the handcuffed volunteers, the desperate faces in Gaza. In an era where public opinion moves faster than governments, Israel's narrative was losing ground. Even within Europe, cracks were appearing. In Spain, where the flotilla had set sail, lawmakers demanded sanctions on Israel, calling the assault an attack not just on Gaza, but on European sovereignty itself. The United Nations Security Council convened once more, this time with unprecedented tension. African delegates, emboldened by Traoré's defiance, demanded an international investigation. Western powers resisted, blocking resolutions and calling for restraint on all sides. But the tide of history seemed to be shifting. A diplomat from Burkina Faso delivered one of the most fiery speeches in recent UN memory. When medicine is confiscated, when bread is stolen, when water is blocked, this is not defense. This is war against humanity. His words brought thunderous applause from much of the global south. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré unveiled his next move. He announced that a new flotilla, twice the size of the one destroyed, would soon set sail. This time, it would not be a lone humanitarian effort. It would carry the flags of multiple African nations, guarded by their naval escorts. If Israel dares to strike again, he said, they will not be striking at volunteers. They will be striking at sovereign nations. The announcement sent shockwaves through Washington, Paris, and London. Western leaders scrambled to pressure African governments to withdraw, warning of economic and military consequences. But for the first time in decades, Africa was not backing down. Inside Israel, the pressure mounted as well. Opposition leaders accused Netanyahu of dragging the country into an avoidable diplomatic crisis. Protests broke out in Tel Aviv, with Israelis demanding answers about why humanitarian aid had been treated like a military threat. Families of detained aid workers pleaded for their release, while international lawyers prepared legal challenges. The Israeli government, once confident in its ability to weather criticism, suddenly found itself cornered by growing isolation. On the streets of Gaza, hope flickered once more. News of Traoré's defiance spread quickly. Crowds gathered around radios and televisions, cheering as African leaders promised new aid. Children painted Burkina Faso's flag on walls alongside Palestinian symbols. A Gazan teacher told reporters, "For the first time, we feel Africa is our shield. We are not alone." The sense of solidarity between Africans and Palestinians had become a powerful weapon, one that Israel could not simply detain or confiscate. Analysts now warn that the crisis could redefine international relations for years to come. Some believe Africa is on the verge of becoming a new geopolitical bloc, one that challenges the dominance of Western powers. Others fear that open confrontation with Israel could spiral into a broader conflict, dragging in major powers and destabilizing the region. Yet Traoré seems undeterred. His speeches frame the struggle not just as a political dispute, but as a moral one, a battle between those who defend life and those who blockade it. As midnight falls across Ouagadougou, the streets remain alive with chants, music, and firelight. Supporters call Traoré the voice of Africa, while international media scramble to cover his every move. In Israel, Netanyahu faces one of the greatest tests of his leadership, as the threat of an African-led flotilla looms on the horizon. And in Gaza, families wait, holding on to the fragile promise that real help may soon arrive. The world now stands at a crossroads. Will the next flotilla ignite a confrontation unlike any we've seen before? Or will the pressure force Israel to reconsider its blockade? What is certain is that the bold defiance of one African leader has transformed the fate of an entire region. From the shores of Spain to the streets of Gaza, from the halls of the UN to the palaces of Tel Aviv, the name Ibrahim Traoré is now etched into the global debate. And as the next chapter unfolds, one truth is clear. History is being written not in Washington, not in Brussels, but in the heart of Africa.